Well, pressure is just a concept in the mind. There's no such thing as pressure. So each individual will view different situations as pressure. Sometimes the scoreboard to them reflects pressure. Sometimes the opposition bowler reflects pressure. Sometimes it's the situation in the game. Sometimes it might be a particular wicket that they struggle on. So I just try and help them understand what are the things that you find as slightly difficult situations, and let's look at a way to navigate the difficult situation. And if we're focusing on what we can identify what is a difficult situation, and we can identify ways of navigating it, then that too largely helps just decrease pressure. And the other thing about pressure is it happens when we place a high value. The higher the value we place on the results, the higher the pressure. And I help players understand, well, why are you placing a high value on this result? Because at the end of the road, it's just a cricket game. We're going to win or we're going to lose. You're going to score runs or you're not going to score runs. That's the nature of the game. And people tend to place high values from the place of ego, whereas if I do well, I look good, I feel good, and I'm judged well. If I don't do well, I look bad, I feel bad, and people might criticize me or be negative. And if players realize that actually that's not a very healthy way of viewing success and failure according to how I feel and how people judge me, because that's the ego at play. And when people realize actually I might win, I might not, I might do well, I might not, so let me focus on what I need to do, and to devalue the importance of the result. And the way that a player does that, and I often use the example of Hashim Amla, he does that probably as well as anyone I know in the world, is that he's so secure within who he is as a person before he walks out to bat, that if he gets 200 or he gets 0, it doesn't really make a big difference to who he is as a person and his self-esteem and his sense of identity. He gives everything he can to do well, because he really wants to do well, but he certainly doesn't need to do well. And as soon as someone gets a little bit desperate or they need to do well, they feel the pressure. It's because of that unconscious drive of the ego to I want to look good and I don't want to look bad. And if we get to actually understand that and to be able to intercept that thinking the time and say, well, it actually doesn't matter whether I succeed or fail. What matters is how clever am I being, how committed am I to my skill, how smart are my decisions, how am I working within the team plans, and that's actually all that's important. And at the end of the game, they know they walk off the field, and if they've done that well, the coach is going to put the arm around and say, great job. I find that compared to South Africans, Australians, Indians are far more open to share their insecurities. They don't come across, and I'm generalizing, with the tough, macho, bravado, I'm going to look and pretend that I'm tough and in control and not experiencing any pressure, and I'm going to suppress all of those insecurities, which that's more of an Australian, South African thing to do. So it's more difficult to get them to actually open up and say, yes, I am scared of fast bowling, or I do have some vulnerabilities or insecurities and doubts. I find in general Indians are more open to be able to have those conversations, and it's not as big a social crime to acknowledge vulnerability and insecurity. So it's easier to work with in general with Indians in that regard. But I think the pressures to make it, not just in cricket, in the professional world in India, the pressures are far greater in India than what they are anywhere else certainly in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, India. I just see that every year with exam times. I see the pressure on everyone, and there's so many people vying for so few jobs, and there's so much skill both in the workplace, in the academia, and in cricket. There's an unbelievable amount of skill. So the pile is huge, but there's only a tiny little spot at the top. So there is that. It's not so much the cricket pressure, but it's the livelihood, just the pressure of making a livelihood, and knowing the difference between making and not making it is really significant. In a sport like cricket, particularly batsmen do need to be more self-focused than team-focused. The old adages of always putting team ahead of self, I don't believe holds true for cricket. I do believe that players need to be allowed and encouraged to have a healthy focus on their own game, on their own pursuits, on their own career, but healthy in that it also does line up with a team environment. The problem comes in when someone is overly team focused, or a coach is forcing everyone to have too much of a team focus, that's not real. And the problem on the other side of the spectrum happens when someone is just way too self-involved and that they actually don't fit into a team environment. And one thing that we know is those superstar individuals who really are overly narcissistic, they might deliver over the course of a tournament or season a number of game-winning performances, but those individual performances they might win games, but they don't win tournaments. Where actually whole teams who are pulling together, and happy teams more often than not win tournaments than teams with a couple of overly narcissistic superstars. And we do see that time and time again, particularly when it gets down to quarterfinals, semi-finals, finals. It requires everybody to chip in, and only every now and again do you get one individual who blows a game away, but that's not the norm. So certainly in the Rajasthan Royals, the way we pick is we first look at a player's statistics, and if he passes the statistics test, then the next test will say, well, let's look at the character of the individual. Do we believe he can fit into the kind of team that we want to create, where it's a really healthy team environment, which I firmly believe in. I think it's massively important. So we always select players on those two criteria: first their numbers, and then their character. And if they've got unbelievable numbers and there's someone who is known to be overly narcissistic or self-focused and not a team player, we'll very happily put their name, scratch a line through their name. And we're very fortunate here in the Royals that we've got team management and ownership who also believe in that philosophy that good players and good people are both equally important. My message to be a youngster would be a few things. Be as hungry as you possibly can be to learn about the game, about yourself, and about life. So it's the hunger to learn, keep perspective, know that cricket is just a game. In fact, life is just a game. So don't get too attached to success, don't get too attached to failure, don't get too attached to if someone says you're great, it doesn't mean you're great. When someone says you'll never make it, it doesn't mean you'll never make it. So just don't get attached to anything, but keep, as much as you work on being a good cricketer, spend at least as much time going inward to work on being the kind of character and the kind of person that you ideally would like to be and would make your parents and your children proud. There are so many lessons, but the one that comes to me is that there's three ways to do things. There's my way, there's the right way, which is what the popular consensus of the day is, and is the best way, which is what is going to work for us here at the Rajasthan Royals, or what's going to work with us in the Indian cricket team, or South Africa, or the Australian Big Bash League where I coach. And it's very important to know what my way is, to get that out of the way and make sure that I don't do it my way. It's important to know what the experts, the so-called panel of experts out there say, so that that's considered, but to not do it that way, and then to arrive with a beginner's mind and say, right, this is us for this season, let's create the way that we believe is going to work the best for us.